And good evening, I'm Errol Laborde. Morcia is off tonight. There were fast cars and fast news in the headlines this week, including a sheriff getting angry, two high-profile legal cases, the anniversary of a disaster, the legislature heading to Baton Rouge, and waving the checkered flag on the West Bank. In the pit for us are tonight's Informed reporters, Mark Schleifstein, environmental reporter, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, Jeremy Alford, publisher, LaPolitics.com, Dawn Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and Mike Perlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV, Channel 4. Jeremy, we'll begin with you. Monday, the legislature goes into session. What's number one on the agenda?
Within 72 hours, we'll be in the session of our discontent. It's an interesting time around the Capitol. The snakes start showing up. They sneak into the Capitol. And I'm talking about actual snakes, not lobbyists or lawmakers. They end up on Press Road. The facade of the front of the Capitol is starting to crumble. They have scaffolding out front.
So real snakes.
Right, real snakes. There's a lot of construction, a lot of cones, so it's a fitting time for the budget to be falling apart. But without a doubt, everything's about the budget. And we have a $1.6 billion budget shortfall. Lawmakers have 2 months to figure it out. And the undercurrent, everything driving decision-making is the fall elections. Lawmakers have to face voters in the fall. Right now, they have to face a budget problem. But there's a few outside issues, too. There's Common Core, there's a religious freedom bill, there's a paycheck protection issue that's going to pit the unions against business. But really, the focus is going to be on taxes, incentives, reducing exemptions, and really the budget. That is the top issue is, are you going to cut higher ed and healthcare to the bone? Or are you going to make businesses pay more taxes? Or are you going to find a happy medium and make everybody angry?
Now, we've been talking a lot about at the national level, this guy Grover Norquist and the influence he's having on congressional politics. Is his influence being felt at the legislature, too?
Absolutely, and lawmakers have just completely lost their mind, most of them about Grover Norquist, Americans for Tax Reform. Governor Jindal consulted them to find out what is a tax, what isn't a tax. There seems to be a sliding scale on what the governor does consider a tax, because that's the real challenge this year, is that the governor will not sign into law a net tax increase. He will not sign into law any rollback of an exemption that results in someone paying higher taxes. But he will sign a tax into law if there's an offset somewhere else in the budget. The phrase is revenue neutral, and it may as well be a 4-letter word around the Capitol because it's driving lawmakers crazy. But they have to make it work within the framework, inside that framework. And the idea right now is to possibly look at repealing the inventory tax. That would give them $450 to $500 million, an umbrella under which to raise taxes through tobacco, maybe the internet sales tax. These are what lawmakers and lobbyists are starting to refer to as the low-hanging fruit of the session. These are things that we're going to see starting to move during the second week. The first week, next week, is going to be slow. The real action is going to be at the parties every night because there's not going to be a lot happening at the Capitol. It's going to be private meetings. You know, it's one thing for a lawmaker to sit in his office alone in his district and take a stance, but once you get him in a building with a bunch of other lawmakers, lobbyists, constituents are going to be showing up by the dozens and hundreds. It kind of starts to shape their decision making.
Also, in the first week, don't you also get a lot of fanciful legislation that gets a lot of publicity, and a lawmaker will introduce, and knowing he doesn't have any chance in the world to win, but at least he can tell his constituents, I tried?
Yeah, and of course that's going to happen during the election year. Right now, a lot of lawmakers are scratching their heads and wondering why a freshman lawmaker from Shreveport filed a bill on religious freedom that has caused a huge controversy in other states like Indiana. That bill has been introduced. You know, you can pretty much put safe money on the fact that it's going to bring people to the Capitol. It's going to be very emotional, very heated, and it's going to just soak up hours and hours of debate, and it's going to distract from lawmakers' focus on the budget. Whether it passes or not is a different question. But really, this year is different. There are hundreds of bills filed that feed into the budget, and usually we just have a main budget bill and then a group of supplemental bills that go into the crafting of the balancing of the budget. But now we have that plus all these other bills that have to be you have to keep track on as we move through session. So I would say that even though there will be a few distractions here and there, the focus and all the action will be on the budget and these tax proposals.
Now, wait a minute. One person not running for re-election is Governor Jindal.
Well, he's probably running for president, right?
He's looking for the national stage. Doesn't look like he's getting a lot of traction there. But so how much clout does he have with the legislature in here in Louisiana?
Well, it doesn't matter who the governor is. The governor always finds a way to control the budget and control the session. Traditionally, the executive budget always looks like the budget that comes out of the legislature. This year is a little bit different because the governor hasn't really presented a plan per se, but rather a set of recommendations. All he's asked lawmakers to do is to not send him any net increase in taxes. So at the end of the day, as long as he can balance a budget with no new taxes, he'll be able to claim victory. But the governor still has line item veto. He can still veto the budget. He can veto bills. He still has control over the capital outlay bill, which are projects that lawmakers can bring home. And right now, every lawmaker is looking to be able to turn around in a few months and go back down to Bayou and say, hey, I got this bridge and the capital outlay bill, and the governor can make that happen. The governor may be unpopular, and lawmakers may be upset with him, but as long as he has his hands on those purse strings, and as long as he has control over the choke points in the legislative process, meaning the House Speaker, the Senate President, Louisiana governors are powerful. It doesn't matter if they're lame duck or not.
Well, Mike, while the governor is facing his trials, there are trials of a different sort in New Orleans. Two cases of trials that have almost nationwide implications, including in California and in New Orleans. And we've had hearings on both. One is Robert Durst and two is Darren Sharper. Could you tell us where these are going?
Well, you say trials. We may or may not have trials. But no, they're both celebrity defendants with a national profile, and for each of these court hearings, whether it's Darren Sharper recently just came back after being extradited from California, or Robert Durst, who was caught here pursuant to a search warrant for murder issued in Los Angeles, the pack of national media, tabloid journalists, and of course all the local press assembles for each one of these. The amazing thing about these cases to me is that one of them is basically completely over and finished, and that's Darren Sharper. He signed on to a global plea agreement disposing of 8 different rape allegations, 4 different states, 5 jurisdictions, as all part of a global plea agreement. It ends here in both a federal case against him as well as a state case.
Have you ever heard of something like this, a global plea agreement, and who put this together? This is like brilliant lawyering going on.
There's no doubt. First of all, he has a dream team of attorneys, and every time he steps into court, it seems like some new star attorney has been added to the team. So clearly, and with these cases in multiple jurisdictions, he needs local representation in each one. So some very sharp legal minds have all come together, and it's an unprecedented case. This is basically what he has confessed to now, is serial rapes in these 4 different states in a way that few people could really pull off. The jet setting, the access to lavish condos and luxury hotels, and the kind of parties where he could, as he did, slip narcotics to knock out women in order to rape them. And but with the global plea agreement, there's almost nothing to see here. We know exactly what the terms are, and as a matter of fact, some really, really good reporting by the New Orleans Advocate, partnered with ProPublica, has revealed all of the details. So while the Court of Public Opinion seems to be wondering how he could get off so light, serving only 10 years, essentially. He served 1, so 9 more years in prison. But it looks like the other terms of this plea agreement are rather onerous, and it includes lifetime probation, can't step foot in bars, can't drink alcohol. He'll be a lifetime registered sex offender. In some cases, in Arizona, for example, where it looks like he was going to be at the end of all of his prison term and after supervised release, and he is on lifetime probation in Arizona, where he'll have to live the rest of his life according to the terms of the agreement. They can go in and monitor him, search, get drug testing, and even sexual counseling that includes this, penile monitor, where they see if he's still has an inclination toward non-consensual sex. So it's unprecedented and rather extreme, not in the prison sentence, but in the terms he's going to have to adhere to. If he doesn't, it's another 14 years in the slammer. Now, the flip side is Robert Durst, where all attention on that case, where nothing has happened. We've had charges here pursuant to the search of his hotel room, had 5 ounces of marijuana and a gun. As a convicted felon, that's felon with a firearm and carrying a firearm with narcotics. And there's now an indictment in state court. His attorneys are desperate to get him out of here, extradite him to California. But now they have to go through the long legal process of a 71-year-old man about to turn 72 on Sunday in very poor health. Each subsequent court hearing, he looks worse and worse. So you got to wonder, is he even going to survive to see a trial?
And speaking of long legal processes, a week from Monday is the 5th anniversary of what we call BP. It's known by various names. Mark, could you just begin by just taking us back to that first day and just give us sort of an overview? What happened that day, and what do we know about what caused it?
Okay, well, basically what happened was that they were in the midst of trying to close up a drill hole that they had made into a deposit almost 2 miles deep in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a mile below the surface to the top of the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, and then they drilled into this reservoir. So they were trying to get it closed so they could start planning for how to actually develop this huge reservoir, put additional wells in. And in the closure process, they really screwed up. There were a variety of errors and mistakes that were made that resulted in natural gas blowing back up the well, and then a blowout preventer that was on the floor of the Gulf of Mexico failed to work for a variety of different reasons, including a battery that was missing or was that had failed. And the result was that you had all this natural gas literally flowing a mile up from the Gulf of Mexico onto the deck of this huge drilling rig boat. And you get one spark and bam, this thing goes off and a huge fire occurs. There were 126 employees on the boat. 11 bodies were never recovered. And a day and a half later, the rig boat sank into the Gulf of Mexico. The connection between the rig boat and the bottom broke, and you started having oil flowing with nothing stopping it coming out of that well.
Mark, it took 87 days, almost 3 months, before they were able to stop it. And there was a lot of ingenuity because they didn't know how to do it, so somebody had to figure out how to do it and then to do it. But what if they hadn't found the solution? How long could that have gone on?
Well, it could have gone on until there was no longer enough pressure in the reservoir to push oil out. A good example is the Ixtoc well blowout that occurred in 1989 off the coast of Mexico in shallower water that went on for 9 months. It could have been flowing for quite a while at that same, 40, 50,000 barrels a day. Huge amount of oil coming out.
Now, in these years since then, I know you've been following the story and following the coastlines. And what kind of shape are we in now?
Well, that's an interesting question, and there are two ways of answering that question, and they're both getting a lot of play right now. The first one is, what were the effects of all that oil in the context of the Oil Pollution Act? How much monetary damage was done, and how do you figure out how to compensate for that, either the natural resources or individuals or the government? What's already in the midst of happening is that a federal judge is looking at possibly putting a fine under the Clean Water Act of as much as $13.7 billion. At some point in the future, there will be a natural resource damage assessment report that will determine what all the damages will be from this spill and how much money that amounts to and what kind of projects can be built to restore it, that could be a similar amount that could be charged towards the company. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, what are the long-term effects of this spill on the natural resources of the Gulf of Mexico and the shoreline and on individuals, and that's much more unclear. We now have quite a few papers that are out, probably about 3,000 papers that are peer-reviewed that have been published in the last 5 years, but that's only a small percentage of the real information that's been gathered and put together in terms of reports. A lot of that is buried behind the natural resource damage assessment, and we're not going to find that out for a couple of years.
If something like this would happen in the Gulf or anywhere tomorrow, do we have the equipment available now to respond to it more quickly?
The industry says that we do. They've put together a consortium that has new equipment that is able to go out and respond to these sorts of accidents in the future. But no matter who does it or how they do it, it's going to take weeks to shut down, at the very least, a similar sort of an accident. We're not talking about something where you rush out there the same day, pop a
life
it just doesn't work that way. So it's really an untested system, other than the sort of tabletop and in-place exercises that they've gone to get it to that point.
Okay. Well, Dawn, untested still is New Orleans as a site for an Indy Grand Prix, but we'll see this weekend. This is something really new to the area, and you've been following it.
Brand new to the area. It's the second race of the IndyCar season. The first one was in St. Petersburg, Florida last month. It's the first major automobile race in New Orleans since 1995, when I'm told by these gentlemen here there was one in downtown New Orleans.
But it wasn't the same kind of cars.
Not the same kind of car. This is the Indy cars, part of the Indy series leading to the Indianapolis 500. This is a 205.5-mile race. It's an estimated 75 laps around a 2.74-mile course at NOLA Motorsports in Avondale. It's a brand new course with 13 turns in it, and the drivers say it's a fun, different kind of course because how flat it is. They say for them it's a little awkward because they get no vantage points. There's nowhere in the course where they can see where other drivers are or what's coming up. Apparently viewers are loving it because they can see the whole course because there are no hills in it. This has been in the making since 2013. Laney Schwest, who's the owner and developer of NOLA Motorsports, has been working together with the state. The state actually provided a $4.5 million tourism grant. And Schwest put $2 million more of his money up to get the track to standards, Indy standards. There's a 3-year deal for this event to happen. This is the first of those 3 years, and they estimate it could bring in up to $100 million in economic impact in those 3 years, with 80,000 perhaps possible spectators over the course of the weekend. Today, for instance, there are people attending practice sessions and time trials. Those are today and tomorrow. The actual race is Sunday. It will be internationally televised on the NBC Sports system. There's a parade that will kick it off with the 610 Stompers and 2 Bacchus floats and the Roots of Music and the Rolling Elvi, and they're bringing in a lot of New Orleans flair and New Orleans style food. And then skydivers will dive onto the track, and the official race will begin. Grand Marshal of the race is the Saints' Thomas Morstead. So it's kind of a way to showcase a lot of New Orleans things, Mardi Gras and music and food and Saints, and all bring it together for this race that takes place Sunday afternoon.
I tend to understand life in terms of baseball, right? If this is this Major League?
This is Major League.
Okay, this isn't like the AAA level. These are like the guys who we'll see in Indy.
Right. The real races internationally, Andretti Sports, the big teams. The biggest concern probably for this weekend doing it is the inclement weather we're expecting. So there was talk of all sorts of different tires being switched out, and Firestone apparently has the tire that the drivers like best that handles the rain. Sunday's supposed to be a wet day, but it's not supposed to change the fact that the race is happening. They also have an area, a family fun zone with carnival rides and a Ferris wheel, and the whole facility has changed for the weekend. There is no public parking on site if anybody's trying to head out that way. There are shuttles that go from parking areas on Lapalco Boulevard and Avondale Shipyard, as well as a shuttle from Harrah's Casino.
So this is about a 205
miles.
So we were figuring it was about the equivalent between New Orleans and Pensacola.
Somewhere, somewhere
without
in the
having to go
beaches.
through Mobile and that tunnel. This is
right, but you just have to keep going around and around through those 13 turns. So it's the first of its kind for us here, and it'll happen for the next 3 years.
So does this sound like it's something that's going to work out, or?
So far, I mean, we'll have to see. We'll really have to see. I think the weather will play a big part in how many spectators actually get out there this weekend, and whether they're willing to sit in the rain and watch their favorite drivers go around the track. We'll have to talk again next week and see how it went.
Well, Mike, Newell Norman, the sheriff in Jefferson Parish, is a very popular elected official. He gets elected like 90 percentile of the vote, usually very low key. But he got angry this week. He got angry about people's attitude about legalizing drugs and not really understanding the records of the people out there. What do you think about his comments?
Well, angry might be an understatement. It was an out-and-out tirade. And for anyone who didn't see it, I urge you to go to WWL-TV.com. Never mind the print version, which I wrote, but just click on the video. That's all you need to see is Newell Norman, going off. And, it was kind of a wide-ranging tirade, but it started with the fact that there were stories that pointed out that there have been 4 deputy-involved shootings this year. This most recent one was a fatal shooting after a car chase in which the suspect fired 4 shots at deputies. Well, the deputies did return fire, a minimum of 61 shots based on the bullet casing fired at the suspect. And the fact that the shooting was even questioned, that family members, witnesses, questioned whether the deputies were in the right, really set him off. Then he proceeded to show some social media videos that had been posted by this suspect in the version of a rap song in which he's showing off guns, Glocks, semi-automatic pistols with laser sights, all the while smoking blunts and rapping about it. And he posted that and basically, read the public the riot act. This is what happens if you don't take drugs seriously. He talked about, some bills to legalize marijuana, at least medicinal marijuana, and railed against that and pointed out that this is what it leads to, the glorification of this. And he then kind of turned it on the public in his parish. If you see this activity and you don't want bullets flying through your homes and cars, you need to call me. And he just kind of went off from there. So it was quite a display. You have to think that some of it was true anger and some of it was somewhat calculated. He's as you said, extremely popular, preaching to his constituents in Jefferson Parish. I think this only gains him more popularity. Okay.
And Jeremy, talking about popularity and lack of popularity, how's the governor's race doing?
It's shaping up. It's accelerated. I don't think anybody has seen a governor's race move this quickly. Scott Angel out of Acadiana has already spent a couple of $100,000 on ads in Lafayette, 800 points in Baton Rouge. John Bell Edwards has been up on radio. We've seen several polls already. They're all raising money. But if you believe the poll numbers and you believe the conventional wisdom, if the race were held this weekend, it would be David Vitter versus John Bell Edwards. Classic Louisiana open primary runoff versus right of the field and the left of the field. And more than likely, it would be Vitter in the runoff. If you look at the most recent electoral trends. So the big question remains, will another Democrat get in? If another Democrat does, maybe they can undercut John Bell Edwards and create a four-way race for that second spot.
But does the Democrat have a chance of being elected anymore? At least at this stage in Louisiana politics, can a Democrat be elected statewide?
Sure, I think so. I think that is less likely than ever in Louisiana's recent political history. And I think it's going to be tough in this race as well. I think we learned last year by the polarizing results that we saw with Landry versus Cassidy that it's just tough, that Louisiana is a fire engine red state, and that it's going to take a little bit of maneuvering and a little bit of luck for a Democrat to get in there and win. I think there are some other races down the ballot where a Democrat could do well, maybe in the Attorney General's race. But in terms of governor, You know, the race has accelerated to the point where the candidates are finally starting to kind of throw shots at each other. You know, we've seen David Vitter go after Scott Angel. We've seen John Bell Edwards go after Angel. We've seen Darden go after Vitter. All of them go after Bobby Jindal. And that's really interesting in that Bobby Jindal has replaced the Obama factor. If you remember last year, Landrieu lost for a lot of reasons, the chief among them being that our opposition was able to condense a narrative down to 3 main talking points for low information voters, being Obama, Obama, Obama. You know, this year may very well be Jindal, Jindal, Jindal.
And who could be, is there a lot of national money going to be invested in this?
Absolutely. This will be the most expensive race in Louisiana's history for governor. You can go ahead and write it down. It's already happening. There are already 3 super PACs. These are groups that can raise unlimited amounts of money to support a candidate or campaign as long as they don't coordinate. David Vitter already has a super PAC supporting him. Between the 2 of them, they have about $6 million, $7 million. There's a super PAC for Scott Angel, super PAC for Darden, nothing for John Bell, but there's going to be a lot of outside money.
Speaking of super, let's go back to Mark and let's look at the week coming up ahead. What should we be aware of?
Well, one of the things that will happen in the first week of the legislature is that the state legislature is likely to pass the annual plan for the coastal master plan, which is about $880 million that will be put towards both improving levees and coastal restoration projects.
Okay, Dawn.
2 weeks from now, NOLA Navy Week kicks off along the Mississippi River. There will be 6 military ships open for tours and looking at, it's the United States Navy, the Coast Guard, but also ships from England and Canada to be in town. Good
That's
thing.
in 2 weeks.
Fun to look at, and a seafood cook-off between the ships.
Oh, well, okay. Mike?
The one thing to look ahead to at the end of this month, there's going to be a 5th Circuit Court of Appeal hearing on the Danziger Bridge.
Wow.
Defendants who, of course, their convictions were thrown out because of the online commenting scandal, and but it is no sure bet that ruling to throw out those convictions is going to stand before a 3-judge panel of the 5th Circuit.
Okay, and Jeremy?
Bobby Jindal gives his final address to a joint legislature Monday at noon. Will he be speaking to voters in Avery Island or voters in Rhode Island? I think it'll probably be a little bit of both.
And real quickly, Lieutenant Governor's race, who do you call the leaders right now?
You know, it's tough to say. I mean, the polls have both Jefferson Parish President John Young and former Plaquemines Parish President Billy Nungesser kind of duking it out for the other runoff spot against Baton Rouge Mayor Kip Holden, the lone Democrat in the race, who looks like could very well just walk right into to that one runoff spot.
So this would be the typical Democrat-Republican thing?
Open primary, classic, yeah. One side of the field versus the other.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. It was very interesting. Thanks to all of you for watching. We'll be back again next week. Bye-bye.